Hi everyone. Thanks for making some time this evening. I'm just letting a couple of colleagues enter the event, and then we'll make a start. So hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. Good stuff. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Dean. I needed those thumbs up, so I appreciate that. Maybe it was just thumbs up for the encouragement for the session as well. Who knows? I'll take that. I'll take that all day long. Thank you very much. Look, I'll admit more people as we're going along. But thanks very much. My name's Joe Fortune. I'm the General Secretary of the Co-operative Party. And you're going to have to bear with me today because we usually have another colleague with us on these sessions, on these summer schools, but also our Cooperation Live. And today they've let me fly solo. So if it all goes wrong, you all know it's just my fault. There's no colleague I can turn to. I can't say, well, it's all Izzy Userelli's fault or anything like that. It will all be my fault. So do bear with me. But thank you. Today's session is all about the cooperative party and the wider cooperative movement and our link between those two pieces. So I'll run through some of the information, some of the things I find important about that as we go forward. But I just wanted to say about summer school more generally, and what we're trying to achieve is we're a party of new members. We're a party of newer members. You know, many of our members, a large percentage of our members are newer to the party, and I think it's really important that we are a party who is welcoming and understanding and inclusive of new members, making sure that we're bringing people through into the party, into the various ways that they wish to have experiences within the wider cooperative movement or within the cooperative party more generally as well. So I'm really happy that we put these ones on, but I also just want to make sure that you as newer members sort of understand that this is a really important part of our work. It's not something that we just do in August by any stretch of the imagination. This will be a year-round set of engagement. I'm looking forward to ourselves within the team being able to bring forward our new programme in the next couple of weeks. So there we go. So whilst it's the last in this series, it's certainly not the last of the type of work. I've got a couple of bits of housekeeping just to run through just before we kick off. First and foremost, just to say that whilst muted at the minute, I do hope that you'll have questions, comments, discussion following my opening comments about the cooperative link with the cooperative party. And what I'll do at that point is I'll be unmuting you myself. So make sure that if there are pieces for you, use the chat function to ask me any questions as we go along, but also raise your virtual hand as well as we go, so I can make sure that I'm bringing people in. That should be within the reactions side, I think it is. Yeah, if you click on the reactions, you'll be all right, and you'll be able to raise the virtual hand there, and I'll bring you into the discussion. I should also say that this session is being recorded, not for nefarious purposes by any stretch, but just for members who aren't able to join us today. So we do put these sessions online afterwards on our YouTube channel. So if you don't wish to be identifiable on camera for this piece, make sure and feel free to turn the camera off, but hopefully you'll still be able to enjoy and take part in the session as well. Look, they're the pieces of housekeeping, and I did one session a couple of weeks ago within summer school, and I was talking about the Labour Party and our relationship with the Labour Party. But this is the other most important social movement that the cooperative party straddles. We're looking at that we're looking at today, which is the cooperative movement. We were born from the cooperative movement in the same way as the trade unions gave rise to a Labour Party. Our cooperative movement in the UK opened the opportunity for a cooperative party, and we'll look at where that came from as the presentation goes along. But it's one of the most important sets of relationships for the co-op party. Now, what I'm going to do, I am going to open. I've got a couple of slides just to run through with us today. So I'm going to run through those slides with yourselves, and let's see whether I can just get that one to work. No. sorry. Forgive me, of course. Now, the very first opportunity for me to demonstrate that I can do it all on my own, I've failed spectacularly. So just bear with me. There we go. Let's see if I can get that working now. And it's just a few slides just to sort of aid the way in which I'll talk about that link with the co-op movement. So here we go. Hopefully you can see those now, and they're coming through onto your screen. And that should make it much easier for us to see. So the first piece for today's session is just in terms of ourselves and what are we for. I'd said that the co-operative movement gave rise to the Co-operative Party, and why was that? What's the reason for that? So we've been the political party of our co-operative movement for an awful long time. You can see there on the slide, we've been established 103 years ago. We've come through many different trials and tribulations within that time, but it was retail cooperatives who came together those years ago to defend and promote the cooperative movement. Those same reasons why we were formed is central to what we're trying to achieve today. So defending and promoting the movement, but also making sure that we have cooperators at the decision-making tables, because that was the fundamental piece of why the cooperative movement wished to have a cooperative party in the first place. And it was an historic piece in and around that they felt the treatment that the cooperative movement had had from the government of the day. They had been disadvantaged, they'd been ignored. There's an eponymous story about the then Prime Minister rather going to Ascot rather than meeting with the cooperative movement to discuss some of their concerns at the time in and around protected jobs in the First World War. And that's the same reason why we exist today. We need cooperators at decision-making tables to ensure that we're able to grow, we're able to promote our UK cooperative movement, and it's the same then as it is today. We work closely, as you would fully expect, with that cooperative movement. We have a number of relationships which I'll talk through through these slides. But look, fundamentally, it's an incredibly long-serving piece of cooperative movement apparatus, the Cooperative Party, and it was born from need. And I think that when I sort of touch on some of the pieces later in terms of where that need is today, it would have been recognisable those years ago already. Now, here's some of the origins, and it talks about this is the aspect of the UK co-op movement always being a political movement. It always has been a political movement in the UK. It's seen itself in that campaigning role. It's seen itself in that transformational role. And there's some key dates there, some key moments in time you can see on that slide. Now, if we were in other parts of the country, and colleagues in Scotland would be putting other dates here, they'll be talking about the Fenwick Weavers before this, and there's many other examples, Brighton Free Press before this as well. So there's lots of moments and lots of campaigning legacy which takes us to the type of cooperative movement that we have today, this political movement. You know, it talks about, this is one which is often referred to, the Rochdale Pioneers in 1844. They're born from need, and born from a need to identify a different way of doing business. It was a social justice piece, the Rochdale Pioneers, and indeed that their legacy lasts until now. I don't always do this history bit when I'm talking about, because I think it's really important about the relationship that we have today. But look, this gives you a sense of where we come from. It gives you a sense of what we're about. And in 1917, voted the Cooperative Congress voted to establish a political party. So the Cooperative Congress is something which continues to this day. There's Congress was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was when they came together, hundreds of cooperatives around the country came together to ensure that they were voting to establish our party. And what does that look like today? Well, the party has 16 subscribing societies and affiliates. Now, as I say, there was hundreds, I think almost 900 cooperative societies which voted to create the cooperative party. Now, as the slide says, that's not because 890 have decided to disaffiliate from the party at all. What we've seen within the UK co-op movement is a range of consolidations. So like the cooperative group now, which is is the largest co-op in this country, and indeed one of the largest consumer cooperatives in the world, has been part and parcel of consolidation over many years, and so has other cooperative retail societies as well. So whilst there is a smaller number, our geographic spread, if you like, is as great as it was in 1917. So regional retail and independent retail cooperatives such as Scott Mid, Mid Counties, East of England, Central England, of the cooperative party today as they were the founder members in 1917. And that's just points there to that range of sizes of cooperatives that we have within our membership. I said that the cooperative group was one of the largest consumer cooperatives in the world, and we go down to some of the smaller cooperatives in the country, some of the newer cooperatives in the country like Revolver Coffee, but many others in between. So there is a range of size, there is a range of activity within that membership, and it's sort of important just to note, so it's not just all retail societies who are our members, but we also do have 2 trade union affiliate members as well within the cooperative party now, and that's Usdaw and Community as well. So that's the members. So they are members of the cooperative party in the same way as individual members are members of the cooperative party as well. So we have a dual membership in a similar way to the Labour Party. Now, in terms of what does that look like funding wise, our party, the cooperative party, is funded by societies and individual member subscriptions. We don't have outside grants. We have very little other funding. The cooperative party, the overwhelming 99% of our funding comes from those 2 sources, cooperatives and individual members. It gives us a really strong focus as to what we're up to. It gives us a huge focus in terms of our work and the value that we try and provide to the UK cooperative movement and our individual members as well. Our membership, as you can see, has increased over the last period. We had a record individual membership increase last year, and it looks like we're in a similar place for this year as well. So we'll be nearly 13,000 individual members of the cooperative party. Now they coming together to provide that sort of substantive piece of our funding, but retail societies are still the majority of where our funding comes from. It's still the cooperative movement itself is still the larger funder within our organisation, and also, and it says there that it's not just the centre, not just the national party that cooperative societies often are funding and often members of. It's also some of our regional and local parties as well. They have an individual relationship with their regional societies. For example, Chelmsford Star Cooperative will support the Chelmsford and Essex Cooperative Party, but won't affiliate to ourselves nationally in the same way. So there are those different types of relationships, but you can see that there's a central importance and a central link between that cooperative movement and the cooperative party is sort of represented there within that funding. And then there's a bit about how we're working together with the co-op movement, and I might talk a little bit more as we go on in terms of what that looks like today. But there's some sort of structural pieces to be aware of. So our subscribing societies send delegates to annual conference. Our annual conference is our sovereign decision-making organisation body, if you like, for policy, but also rules. Within the party, and also our cooperatives are represented on our NEC as well. So in the same way as the Labour Party may have trade unions, of course we have cooperatives on that body. Now we don't leave it just to the NEC and to annual conference to work with the cooperative movement. So there is an ongoing dialogue with all of our cooperative societies, and indeed the wider cooperative movement. We have huge amount of joint campaigns. As you can see, there's a couple there, which is violence against retail workers, modern slavery, but I could put food justice on there as well. Some of these central campaigns for the Co-operative Party come from and relate straight to that cooperative movement. And I think that for ourselves, what we've seen through COVID in particular has been like that need. And this is something we're going back to 1917, the need of the Co-operative Party was for the cooperative movement to have a fair hearing. And I felt that again sharply through the period of time we've just been through, because we were involved in a huge range of work with our cooperative members through COVID, whether that be matters of making sure that our cooperatives were able to govern themselves, governance pieces, keeping up with emergency company law change, but also pieces like key worker status for retail workers, free school meal vouchers, schemes for our cooperative societies and our cooperative schools to be able to use, making sure that cooperative childcare setting received guidance and support through COVID, and of course end of life care as well is another important aspect of what our cooperative societies are doing within their own cooperatives. And of course that was a place of great import and discussion and need for support through the last 18 months that we've been through as well. So it was a moment in time where the cooperative movement really came together. The Cooperative Party was able to use those relationships and those co-operators around decision-making tables to really make a strong case for support and for understanding for our UK co-op movement. And it just restated that 1917 need in technicolor for myself, as it were. Now, there's another piece to this, which is, and no problem, Alison, I'll bring you, I've got you. There we go, Alison, I'm bringing you in, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. It's only Joe. I don't know if as you're speaking, you're expecting the slides to change, but we still can only see the first one.
Oh, dear me.
That's why we were trying to attract your attention.
Oh, Lordy Lord. Well, no, I thank you very much for bringing something very important to my attention. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do is that I'll finish where I'm up to, and I'll send these slides to all of the participants of the today as well, rather than try and go back through. Let me just see if I'll come straight out of it, and forgive me, everyone. I hope the way I've been talking through has been making some logical sense without those slides coming through, but I will send those around. They were only back up to where I was up to within the discussion, but I'll make a note here and make sure we get those round to you tomorrow as well. But I just wanted to finish in terms of what we're also seeking to do. So I've talked a little bit about the history of it, about the nature of the relationship. I've talked a bit about the type of work that we do together, and I've talked a little bit about that funding relationship within the cooperative movement. But I just wanted to sort of land on another really important aspect of what we're trying to do, which is grow the co-op movement. We're also trying to make sure that members of the Cooperative Party, supporters of the Cooperative Party, are getting involved in wider cooperative activity, because we know that we need to grow. We know that our cooperatives and our cooperative sector needs to be much more visible, needs to be much more active, and that's the other aspect of that political party responsibility that I see, which is bringing people through into activism. So and this is like there's a few basic pieces to say here that everyone on the call will be a member of a cooperative party as a condition of our membership, but you don't have to be limited to one. You can get involved in many others, and I think that some of the really important aspects of community cohesion and community activity that we see are often cooperative. Now, whether they are formal legal structures of cooperatives or not is for me in some ways is not as important as what the cooperative or the cooperative endeavour is producing. So I'll just finish by encouraging yourselves to look through the wider space of cooperative movement, and just make sure that you're having the opportunity to get involved in great cooperatives locally, whether that be a credit union, whether it be community gardens, whether it be some of the bigger pieces in terms of the retail societies, because each one of these cooperatives have a democratic and active democratic structure and are part and parcel of the decision making of those co-ops. So if you're not already looking at the way in which those organizations work, like, we can help. We can point you in the right direction. We can make sure that our team is enabling your wider work within that cooperative movement, but also just to really say that they are all open as a condition of themselves being cooperatives. They are all open organizations who are really want yourselves active members, active decision makers within them. There's some great things I'll sort of point people towards potentially just at the end there was member pioneers, for example, within the cooperative group. Is a particularly active place. It's where the cooperative group is seeking to bring change within the communities in which they serve. I think that they've been a great success within the group, and I'd sort of point people towards that. But of course, it's not limited to the cooperative group. If you happen to be in a trading area within central England or mid counties, there's also member engagement, community involvement pieces which these cooperatives are involved in. I think it's really important that ourselves as co-op members are breathing that new life into that wider co-op movement as well. So look, there's the encouragement for wider activity as well that I'll finish on. I think that where I feel that we've been, where we currently are within the cooperative party, is that I started this job wanting us to be a leading organisation within the cooperative movement. I think that it's sometimes been the case that we've been too quiet and too content with where we've been over the last number of years, going back some years. But I do believe we are a leading organisation within the UK co-op movement now. We have the relationships that I've discussed, but if we are that leading organisation, we have a responsibility as well. And the responsibility on the co-op party that I feel is to ensure that we are a really strong, passionate advocate for the expansion of the co-op movement. So that's why I come to work like double the size of the cooperative sector, why I try and why we try and influence the Labour Party to develop new cooperative endeavour, or work with Metro mayors, work with our councillors to grow the cooperative sector. It's because of that responsibility. If we're not the ones looking to grow it, if we're not the ones looking to defend it, there's no one else to do that to do that role. So I just sort of finish on that responsibility. Now look, I should say that I'm technically, and this is being recorded, so my colleagues will be able to shout at me at great length tomorrow morning when they realise that I wasn't able to move the slides along as I wished, and you all will have to be part of my secret if I get away with it, that it worked very well, but hopefully that's given you a sense of where we're up to with the co-op movement. But I welcome your questions, thoughts, discussion, any points that I haven't covered adequately about what it means to be part of the co-op movement and what it means for the co-op party as well. So if there are any questions and queries that people have, please do go into either go into the chat, and I'll have a look at the chat now, but also put up that virtual hand and I can bring you in to the discussion. So if there is anything, oh look, in the chat there was like, oh Joe, you're messing up. You know, I've only been working at the party 12 years. You would have thought I'd be somewhat more up together than that. We've got one colleague coming in here now, so that I'll take Jay Joseph. Come on in.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. I really take the point about the cooperative party influencing the Labour Party. I wondered to what extent the cooperative party can influence the cooperative group as well. I mean, just an example, I'm convener of a Labour and cooperative farming policy advisory group. And we're obviously looking to influence the purchasing decisions to bring that down to small and medium-sized farmers across the UK. So how much influence does the cooperative party have over the group itself?
It's a really good question, because it's one which is sometimes not misinterpreted is the wrong word, but is sometimes sort of investigated on a range of topics. And I think sometimes there's people who sort of believe that we run the co-op group and we are taking the decisions for the cooperative group, and that's not the case. It's not the case. We have a very good relationship with the cooperative group, and they are our largest cooperative member. And we have lots of that sort of institutional relationship that I talked about people from the cooperative group being on our NEC as well, but that's onto our NEC. So we don't have institutional influence in terms of co-op group board and other pieces like that. There's no relationship which goes that way, because we're a much smaller member of the co-op group than they are of us, if you see what I mean. But that doesn't mean that we don't work together on a range of issues. And I think one of the pieces I would sort of point to is our food justice work in the food justice campaign, and the things that you see from the co-op group now in terms of community larders. I think they're up to 50 community larders, in terms of the way in which they quite frankly advertise themselves, but also increased their contribution to Healthy Start vouchers, came from the co-op party, came from co-op party members. It was a campaign that we started, which has been taken on by the co-op group. Now, there is also something called P6, Principle 6, and we have a Principle 6 officer. And just on that point about purchasing decisions and other things of some of the cooperatives, we're always looking to ensure that co-ops, and this is one of our guiding principles, international cooperative guiding principle, is that co-ops are cooperating with one another. It's a really important principle to the way the movement works. So there is that informal work continuing between co-ops, between ourselves and co-ops, co-op group. What I did say, and I think this is the most important thing in terms of influence on co-op group, or indeed any other cooperative, goes for us as much as it goes for the group, is the internal democratic decision making of that cooperative, because that's the way in which decisions are taken in co-ops. So from our own point of view, our co-ops, but also our individual members, are our sovereign organisation in terms of our policy making and our decision making, and it's the same within the cooperative group. So things like the National Members Council within the co-op group, there's something you're able to Google and find out about your members locally as well, are taking decisions, are holding the board to account on what the co-op group is doing in a way in which the co-op party doesn't. So that's it's not to say that we turn a blind eye, we don't do anything with the group in that space, but we do recognise and we do point people towards their own internal democracy for some of those campaigning pieces. And it's been hugely successful on a range of topics over the last 2 or 3 years as well. So if there was one in terms of procurement policy, food procurement policy, the best people to contact are the members of the National Members Council. We have some fantastic links. For example, the president of that council is a Labour and Cooperative councillor. So there are those relationships, but that's where it's best. That's where those pressures are best brought to bear, in my opinion. We'll always make our opinion known to our members in the same way as they do to us. But in terms of real influence, guess what? Their members, their owners take the decisions over procurement policy and pieces as well. So that's where I'd point people towards more generally for co-ops, but in that case, the co-op group as well. So hopefully that helps and that particular question. And we've got Lee coming in. So Lee, I'm just going to try and unmute yourself as well. So hopefully, there you go, Lee. Come on in.
Fantastic, thank you, Joe. Thanks for this session. I've got a bit of a meandering question around the Preston situation.
Yeah.
Matt Brown, the council leader there, seems to have had quite an economic miracle in his local area by leading procurement to be within the local geography, a model for working there that focusing on, you know, when things are outsourced, they're outsourced to cooperatives, a purchasing model, everything is, you know, grown locally in terms of business, you know, not literally grown from the ground, but they're looking to grow local business, local community, keep the wealth within the area. I've just finished reading his book, which is absolutely fantastic, Paint the Town Red. It's a really good read. what I don't understand is why we're not rolling this principle out further. Why are we not putting pressure on Labour councils, the Labour Party nationally, to try and use this model as well? And indeed, it seems to me, with council elections pretty much every year, a great way of trying to encourage local communities to vote Labour and cooperative would be, and if you do, we'll bring jobs to your area, we'll grow your economy. I wonder if you had any thoughts about that, and where Matt's work might be going.
It's a really good one, and thanks for the question, Lee. I'm going to try and keep my contribution or my response sort of slightly shorter than what I could do through this particular question. But so first things first, in terms of the Preston model, the Co-op Party obviously hugely supportive. We bought over the Evergreen Co-operative in 2016, just when Matt Brown was getting going. I think we published 5 steps for community wealth building in 2017. So we clearly, the Co-operative Party, were a part of that smaller group of organisations at that time who really got in behind and believed within community wealth building model. I myself have sat on the Labour Party's community wealth building unit for a number of years as well. So it's something which is of great import and interest to myself. And I think the first thing I'd say is, number one, I agree in that I believe that type of local government activity, and it being based within cooperative development, based within fairer local economic development, using anchor institutions to bring jobs and to bring fairer and community-owned business into the area, is of great import. And I also believe it's greatly, I believe it's also very popular. I don't think that it's limited just to Preston. I think that what you see often, and it doesn't quite get the same attention, but what you often see is Labour councils and Labour groups taking aspects which are applicable to them in their own areas. So you don't always see the wholesale buy-in of community wealth building, but what you see is its influence in an awful lot of Labour and cooperative local councils. There are some parts of the country which really have gone for it and have done well with it. Swindon is a Labour group in opposition, but have done amazingly to sort of communicate to a positive vision for Swindon using community wealth. And North Ayrshire as well in Scotland is another part of the country which is really in that purist and whole model sense. There are people who believe that you have to have the entirety of the model for it to work. Some really influential people in this space as well, some really, brainy people, much cleverer than I, believe that you have to have the entirety of the model for it to really show benefit. I'm slightly different. I think that something is better than nothing, and I believe that there are parts of the country which have turned political corners using aspects of community wealth. I mean, Oxfordshire and Oxford and Witney, curious parts of the country which don't always scream Labour Party sort of strongholds of old, but they've adopted strong elements of community wealth building, and they've been they've ensured that it's wedded themselves to the community in a way in which they turn up and vote for them, quite frankly. But also other places, Plymouth. I think that if you look at what Plymouth is doing, I think that Plymouth is really quite similar to Preston in some ways. I think that I see very strong parallels between Preston and Plymouth in the way that others potentially don't. But also, I've seen it play within national government as well. Welsh Labour aren't a million miles away from employing techniques of the Preston model. I think that things like their community bank and other aspects is exactly where Matt's trying to get to. I'm really proud that Matt and many others are Labour and cooperative, because I think that the examples that I've pointed to just off the top, they are places where they are run by Labour and cooperative councillors. I think that we do have a very strong offer in local government. We've got nearly 1,000 Labour and cooperative councillors around the country now. A majority of metro mayors are Labour and cooperative as well. Now it's not just a numbers game, it's what are those councillors doing, what are the metro mayors doing, which is of real import to us, and that movement that this session is about. Because I could sit with our cooperative movement and go through the numbers, and they could quite frankly look at me and say, well, that's great, but what are they doing? Because that's the test. That's the test, is what are these people doing? So like where I see the community wealth building, I'm able to point towards cooperative endeavour around the country and around Labour councillors, but also opposition groups seeking to become incumbent council groups using aspects of community wealth. But also if I look at Metro mayors, I don't think that there's an awful lot of difference between what Andy Burnham's done in Greater Manchester. We inspired the Greater Manchester Cooperative Commission. If you look at a number of those recommendations, that's not an awful long way away from where we're up to in Preston and elsewhere. And I think that is for me, so it's not about necessarily the branding. In some ways, it's about the doing. It's about the practical change and action that cooperative members and cooperative councillors and elected representatives are making. So I sometimes felt, and I'll leave it on this point, I sometimes felt through the period of time we've been through, and I've said this to Matt and many others through the period, I sometimes felt that the purest way of looking at community wealth was almost to try and define yourself against others, and that I didn't feel quite caught the mood of what was happening in Labour local government at that period of time. I actually think that there was a much more open door and willingness to have a go at it. Many London boroughs have had a go and continue to do so to this day as well. So I don't think, and they have to interpret it for how it works in their area, because I think that if you look at where it's come from in Cleveland, Ohio, Dust Belt, where everything which can pick up has picked up and walked away. There is no inward investment in any shape or form. I think out of that need, cooperative development has shown itself to be a really strong option for communities. Now, is that the same for Greenwich? Is it the same for Haringey? Is it the same for some of these large London boroughs? I don't think it is. I think that they are in different circumstance, and I think they have to interpret it for their own area. So I'm not. I think there is a powerful tool. I think there is principles within it which we talk about nearly every day, but I don't. I'm not in exactly the same place as everyone, as some of the other organisations who think that it's one size fits all. I just don't. I'm slightly different to that, but it's also made me, hugely unpopular in certain circles anyway. So, but anyway, there's a sense of that question for me, Lee. But it's an important aspect of how we talk about that cooperative difference for our cooperative movement. So thanks,
Joe. Thank you. Aid to my research.
Good stuff. Thank you. At least I've done one thing right today, potentially. Alison, I'm going to ask you to come in now as well. So hopefully you're able to do that. Alison, there we go.
Oh, okay, thanks. I'm obviously really interested in community wealth building and stood for Sheffield in a Sheffield constituency last time. Didn't get it, but nearly did. But the other thing I wanted to ask about was you might have covered this in the Labour one, but the relationship with, what the co-op party's position is on tackling the climate crisis. Because for me, all these things, the community wealth building is about local economic resilience, but you can do that in a way that also builds green jobs. There's Labour for a Green New Deal working hard to try and keep what was really valuable in the 2019 manifesto on the board for the wider Labour movement. And I just wondered, and I've just heard on listening to Farming Today on Radio 4 that Lidl has just promised that it will go zero carbon by 2023. And what we were talking about before about influencing co-op retail. I just what's going on amongst the membership in those areas, and how is it being all brought together?
Yeah, thanks for that. So just on that Sheffield point, and again, this is a way in which we're working to with our cooperative movement in a place like Sheffield. There's some great Hazelwood and other cooperative development organisations in Sheffield, but we brought them to work with a new cooperative advisory board working with Labour and Cooperative Metro Mayor Dan Jarvis, and there are our cooperatives are also within that advisory board. So that's an example of us in your area trying to work together to expand the cooperative endeavour and the cooperative movement via one of our elected representatives. But on the piece in terms of climate change, and it's a good, I think there's two pieces that I'd like to sort of pull our attentions to, I suppose. There's one about the type of co-ops which we can promote outside of membership, because we've been talking about retail societies, but clearly there's other types of cooperatives, and then there's what our cooperative retail society members doing as well. So on that first piece, this is an example of how we can get involved in that wider co-op movement, which is community renewable energy. The party has got a very long track record of working with community energy right across the country, whether community energy, England, Wales and Scotland. We've ensured that we've changed the law for community energy as the cooperative party in the past. We've ensured that there's support for community energy, renewable energy schemes locally. I mentioned Plymouth before. There's a great scheme there pulled together by Labour and Cooperative councillors, but also in Wales as well. Now, there's two bits about what the Co-op Party needs to do for community renewable energy schemes, because I believe that they have got huge potential, and I believe that not from an article of faith, but from what I saw a number of years ago, where there was an enabling policy environment for community energy. The amount of schemes and the amount of energy being produced went up exponentially, and there was huge demand from us within the wider cooperative movement and community-minded people to get involved and own those schemes and to develop those schemes. And then we saw the enabling environment taken away from that type of endeavour. Now, I think so. There you see the Co-op Party's role. Almost that sort of dual role. We've got the role to promote people to get involved and how to get involved, and give people the tools and practical support to run the community energy organisation, point them to how to become owners and raise awareness of what they're doing. But then you've got the political piece. And you've got the political piece about trying to fight for that enabling environment to come back. I don't know, I've countless times, pretty much every finance bill, every year, we try and reintroduce FITs, we try and reintroduce some of it, or hold on to SITR, some of the tax reliefs in and around these endeavours, because that's our role, to try and promote something in this climate change piece, which our cooperative movement is involved in. I suppose I'd finish just on that community energy piece on a positive, which is that despite the enabling environment, it's still going, it's still operating. New schemes are coming on board, and it is diversifying as well into carbon capture and storage and other places as well. And I still see the schemes start, I still see them, their ambition. So I would encourage people to have a look at community energy in their area potentially, but also this area of the cooperative movement more generally. We do have a cooperative Green New Deal policy. We moved it through our conference last year, so you can find that on our website. That's got the entirety of how we see the cooperative difference being within climate, the climate emergency. Often it's centred within people's own responsibility and own involvement, trying to make that relationship between the climate emergency a very personal one. It's something that the cooperation and cooperative models can often help people through. I think that sort of disassociation between what we do as individuals and what we see within the climate emergency is often too great. And I think that cooperative involvement and cooperative ownership is a bridge between those two pieces, and that's what that policy paper speaks to, with some practical examples of what that looks like. And then there's the last piece within your question, which was about our retail societies and within our cooperative members. And I haven't seen the news about Lidl, but I also know that the Co-op Group, but also other cooperatives within membership have got some ambitious climate change and carbon reduction targets themselves. I want to say that it might be 2030 for the cooperative group, but forgive me if I've got that that's the date I have in mind for Co-op Group, but forgive me and I'll correct myself later if I've got that wrong. There are places they are leading in terms of biodegradable bags. What can the Co-op Party do to promote the use of biodegradable plastic bags that the cooperative group use now? I know that they're going non-plastic more generally in the not too distant, but you can only use the biodegradable bags where the council will be able to pick them up and take them away. Now, there aren't that many councils who actually provide that that service. So we've been working and we've been lobbying Labour and cooperative councils and councils more generally to try and increase their ability to accept the collection of and use of biodegradable bags which the Co-op Group use. So if you're in an area which sees the green bags, it means that the council is in a place to be able to dispose of them. If you don't see the green bags, it's because the council isn't in that space, and the Co-op Party is trying to lobby behind the scenes to increase that area. So there are those specific examples. But I know that COP26, I know that is the main focus of some of our independent societies and has been over the last 2 or 3 years. So whilst I've just picked out a couple of smaller examples from Co-op Group, Mid-Counties, Central England and other co-ops are doing huge amounts in this space. It is their focus. It is the one that they come to speak to us about. So when we meet with our subscribing societies, they will start with what they're doing in this space, because this is what they believe their biggest contribution is going to be, not just this year, but going forward over many years. So I'm heartened that the co-op movement and those retail societies are so serious about it, and that it is something that they are active in now. But I also know that there's a huge well of need and want from our retail societies in this space as well. So whilst I've picked a couple of pieces, I hope I've also given the sense of the scale of their priorities. I'd encourage you to look through. I think Mid-Counties is one of the leading societies in this space. So people like Pete Westall and others producing amazing material from Mid-Counties, so I'll point you towards that as well. So hopefully it gives you a sense out from the policy to the practical to the political, allied with some of the work of the retail societies as well. So hopefully a sense, Alison. But again, have a look at that cooperative Green New Deal document as a good starter for us. So I'm just going to bring in, we've got one more hand up, and this is Philip. So I'm going to ask you to come in now, Philip. Don't know whether you're able to do that. I've asked you to unmute, so if you're able to unmute yourself. Phil, are you there? No, I've asked you to unmute, so if you're able to do that, do come in. But I'm just going to have a look whilst you're still looking at that. I'm still just going to have a little look in the chat, because I do see that there's potentially 1 or 2 questions that I've missed here. Paul Richards asking about the cooperative bank, and it's a good question. So it's a fair piece about the bank, because it's something which has been high profile over certainly some years ago. Now, just to give people a sense of the Co-op Bank was a 100% owned subsidiary of the Co-op Group. You can't be a cooperative and a bank by law. Something that we look to change, something that we actually campaigned on and brought amendments to legislation this year. But unlike other parts of Europe, which encourage cooperative banks, which is why you see large cooperative banks, in our country we've said that that's not an appropriate business form, and that's something that we find disappointing, as you can expect. So the Co-op Bank was a 100% owned subsidiary of the Cooperative Group. The Cooperative Bank, through over a period of time through, like it took on Britannia, it took on a number of other building societies at a point in time when building societies were being taken on by banks, you know, maybe about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, something of that order. It put itself into a financial strain. The cooperative bank was then, through that financial strain, became a financial strain on the cooperative group. The cooperative group, through its democratic decision-making structure, decided that it needed to divest itself of the bank. Now, where that's now up to is the bank is not attached to the cooperative group. It's not owned within the cooperative movement. It's still called the Co-op Bank. It still has very strong values and principles written into its articles of association. That was a condition of sale from the cooperative group. So it still has very strong ethical policy, because that was a legacy piece from the co-op group at the point of sale. But it does have different owners. It has been looked at as from the co-op movement more generally, but also as a protected business term, and it's been able to maintain its name as cooperative group. I know it also does support some great cooperative endeavour. So it supports something called the Hive, which Cooperatives UK run, which is about new co-ops. It's about business development. It's about business advice and support as well. So I do know that it's still in the space. I don't have particular contact with Co-op Bank, certainly over the last number of years in particular, and it's not necessarily owned by, well, it's not owned by the cooperative group or within the cooperative movement more generally. So hopefully that helps with that bank piece, Paul. If there's anything in and around the bank or what that means to people, I'm happy to field it as well. But that's sort of where it currently sits and in its position is. So I don't know whether that helps, Paul, but that's the situation with it. Then we've got a question here just about cooperative garden. I think where I was talking potentially there is about two pieces: community ownership of space, community gardens, community development. And you see things like that through Incredible Edible, fantastic organisations like that who are doing cooperative work right around the country, developing small garden spaces, developing community space, also for Incredible Edible's case in particular, for food generation, food production as well, getting community involved and owning these spaces and maintaining the spaces. There are many other examples other than Incredible Edible around, and you'll find much of that on our food justice campaign, because like we've sought to shine a light through our food justice work on community response to food injustice, and it's often in these sort of spaces. The other part of this is something I was talking about, so I just touched on briefly, was allotments. And I suppose I was using that as an example of some of the things, community assets which are cooperatively owned, in that allotments often are co-ops. They often are owned by the people who till the land and have the co-ops. And I just think that this is all part of our wider cooperative family, our hinterland, a hugely important part of what we do. So hopefully that helps just in terms of what I was getting at there, Lady Lola, in terms of cooperative space, cooperative growing space, but also allotments more generally. I'm just having a look here. We've got a question in from Andrew. Central England, so Central England doesn't, so you're saying about member pioneers within the cooperative group. I think there's 1,000 of those around the country, but your question asking just what Central England's position with member pioneers. What they have, Central England is called community councils. So what you can get involved in within Central England is their community council structure. They are grant making bodies. They are bringing very similar change to what the member pioneers are looking to do within the cooperative group. So if you are in that Central England area, it'd be contacting the society for your local community council. Often they are Co-op Party members and Cooperative Party activists who are also involved in that space as well. So hopefully that helps just on a practical piece there, Andrew, about what the difference is is with the co-op, Central England Cooperative. We've got a question there just in terms of new co-ops, and I think it's a really important piece because from Hilary. Hilary asks just in terms of what can we do to help get new co-ops off the ground, and I think this is one of our biggest challenges here and now, because we've been able to talk and secure manifesto commitments in Scotland, Wales and UK Labour for double the size of our cooperative sector, and we've had to look really seriously about how to double the size of that cooperative sector, how to inject rapid growth within cooperation. And there's 2 or 3 really important pieces to that, and I'm going to talk through this really quickly, and then come back to some of the practical aspects of it. But say you wanted to set up a basic partnership or traditional business, it might take you sort of £50 and 10 minutes on Companies House, and you'll have yourself a business. Now within our world, we're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority rather than Companies House, and it would take you nearer 6 months. So there is something which makes being a cooperative harder than it is to go on Companies House website and give them 50 quid and put in the name of your company and you've got the company. There is something intrinsically harder about getting co-ops off the ground. Now, what we need for rapid cooperative growth within this country, I believe, is 2 or 3-fold. First is cooperative development. I think that our cooperative development is strong in some places, but nowhere near enough in terms of nationwide coverage. I don't believe that we have business advisors or professionals trained or incentivized to promote cooperation, to promote cooperative growth. Only too often the co-ops who wish to get going go to their local, maybe their members of their local LEP or business advice consultants, and they will not be able to provide support for cooperative growth. So there is need for cooperative development. What stimulates cooperative development will be funding. I believe that we need to see cooperative development agencies re-established in this country. We did have a cooperative development agency and agencies through the late 70s, early 80s, the point in time where we saw the most co-ops get going. You know, it's not rocket science in some ways, but I believe that they need to be properly funded, these new agencies, and I believe that government and devolved government have a need and a responsibility to do that, make that funding available. This, by the way, was policy that we put into the Labour Party, and the Labour Party ran in 2019 on, Scottish Labour ran in 2021 on, and Welsh Labour ran in 2021 on as well. I also believe that there's a need for new legislation, because I think that we're in a point in time where it is incredibly hard to invest in cooperatives. Now, some of that is about the integrity of our internal democracy, but it's also not helped by regulation. It's not helped by legislation. So there are a range of legislative change that we need to bring forward in order to get more cooperatives off the ground as well. So we've got the funding and we've got the legislation pieces, and they're 2 really important pieces. There was an old Secretary General of Co-ops UK who used to say that cooperatives are freshwater fish swimming in salt water. We're trying to squeeze our way into so many different sectors which simply aren't geared up for our type of business model, and I think there's some truth in that. I do think there's truth in it, because I think if we were doing one thing, one particular business activity, I think that the market would shape itself around it, and business support would shape itself around it. But when you're trying to, run a football club, or run a community asset, or run a retail society, or run, a bike repair shop, or whatever it happens to be, in all of these different aspects of business, we're trying to import our business model into a business as normal type environment, which isn't geared up for it. So I think legislation, I think support in development. Now, there are other pieces in terms of education and others I would point to, but I just wanted to finish on the practical piece, which is in and around how can we help our sector grow. I've talked about the Hive already. I think that there is business support available there. I know that there's fantastic cooperative business support available from organisations like Cooperatives Future, some organisations in the Southwest as well, and indeed in Sheffield I mentioned Hazelwood and others previously. So there is cooperative development support out there, but you've got to know where it is and how to find it. So I think that the party and the wider cooperative movement has got a responsibility to be able to point people towards it. I also think that Co-ops UK are in a place where they are really gearing up in this space. I think that they are doing much better in the space of new cooperatives. The chair of the cooperative group, Jim McMahon, was out seeing 2 new cooperatives today in Greater Manchester. Oh, hello. Oh, 1 or 2 people leaving, sorry. Forgive me. I thought I was sharing those screens again. I thought, Dean, you know, you're giving me the impression that I was messing up on the slides. Forgive me. But so I think that there are organisations out there who can really help new co-ops grow, and I think Co-ops UK is getting into that space as well. So hopefully that gives you a sense of some of the policy needs for new cooperatives, but some of the practical pieces as well. I'm just going to, because I recognise that we're out of time, and I just wanted to make sure that I've covered the other pieces in the chat. So if people, do we have a partnership with cooperative supermarkets to supply, what's the bit there? It's the supply, oh gosh. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. I suppose in terms of that piece about like agreements with cooperative supermarkets to support local candidates campaign, like fundamentally the funding which the cooperative retail societies give to the cooperative party is part and parcel of that support. That's how we support local candidates locally to you know, articulate cooperative policy and become decision makers or fantastic Labour and cooperative elected representatives as well. So I think that's where that partnership really is. The other piece about that local campaign is our partnerships with our cooperative retail societies, those supermarkets, are also part and parcel of some of the most central things that we campaign on. You know, I've mentioned retail workers, food justice, some of the other pieces as well. Often our local campaigning is intrinsically linked through the partnership with our local cooperative societies. So there's the funding that they do give us that we pass on to local candidates, but there's also that campaign piece as well, which you often see local candidates making use of at election time as well. Sid asking just about branches engaging with member pioneers. Absolutely, something we encourage. We've seen some great examples around the country of that. Member pioneers have got opportunity to bring change and support for local projects. We'd always encourage member pioneers to be invited to branches, to participate in cooperative branches. We've also seen member pioneers from the cooperative group become Labour and cooperative councillors and elected representatives as well. So it's a really important piece for us in engaging in that space. I'd encourage you to get in touch with my colleague Emma Hoddenott if you've got particular member pioneers in your area which you wish to engage with. Emma's the best person to contact there. Absolutely right. And just Therese, Wirral Council, we're talking about Preston before, and Wirral and many other places are taking it on. I've seen what Wirral's up to, and I think it's fantastic. And I think I've sort of run through most of those questions. Yeah, I think I've run through most of those questions. So look, if there's nothing else from other colleagues, I hope that I've run over ever so slightly over time, so forgive me for that, but hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully it's given you a sense of some of the things that the Co-op Party find important, and some of those links and the way in which we work with the Co-op movement. You'll see it through the life of membership. You'll start to see the way we communicate, the emails, the campaigns. You'll start to see that golden thread going back to all the different aspects of the Co-op movement that I've talked about, and if it's not, we're not doing our job. So that's a challenge for myself to take away. So other than that, I just want to thank you for making the time today for this particular session. Thanks for your questions, thanks for your comments, thanks for your patience, most importantly. I think that's important to say. I've got the list of attendees, so I will circulate those slides tomorrow. Other than that, thank you very much and enjoy your evening. See you soon. Bye bye. Bye bye.